Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today I'm talking about Escape from Valo by Daniel Jose Older and Alyssa Wong. This is the first middle grade release of High Republic Phase 3. And this novel, it takes place, of course, after the fall of Starlight Beacon. I will say that the events of this novel, they do run kind of separately from the other stuff going on in the High Republic right now. So, and that is typical of what the High Republic has been doing with the middle grade novels is they do feel kind of like they're telling a different story just so that way if you don't feel like reading a middle grade novel, you don't have to. And you're not going to be missing any major details. But I do want to say I've really enjoyed the middle grade novels from the High Republic. Yes, they are kids stories. They're written for like a 12 to 14-year-old target audience. So, I mean, you can tell that that is the target audience of the novel is it's written for that age demographic. But I feel like the stories that have been told in this format in the High Republic have been really cute and fun so far. Like I really enjoyed Quest for the Hidden City, which was one of the middle grade novels from Phase 2. It actually ended up being one of my favorite reads from Phase 2, funny enough. So don't discount the middle grade novels if it's something you think you might be interested in, definitely check it out. Because I feel like even though it's for a younger target audience, they're still delivering some really good storytelling and some cool aspects to the High Republic as well. So, yeah, I did want to get that little disclaimer out of the way about the middle grade side of the High Republic. You don't have to read it if you don't want to, but if you think it might be something you may enjoy, then definitely check it out because I've really enjoyed these books. And yeah, this novel was no different. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading it. I thought that the characters were really cute and fun. And yeah, I mean, you can tell that the characters are 12 to 14 years old. They are written true to the age group that they're at. But I mean, who cares? You know, Star Wars is for 12-year-olds. If you're a Star Wars fan, you already know that. So now it is a shorter read, of course. So you're not going to get quite as much like explanation, reflection, like drawing out the events like you would in an adult novel. It is much quicker paced. It is much more just kind of like giving you the need to know information. It's not really going to like elaborate a ton on stuff, but to me like even though that is something that I would expect for this age group, that didn't affect the story negatively for me at all. Like I thought that the story that Daniel Jose Older and Alyssa Wong were telling was like perfect for this type of novel. There was also some cool discussion in this novel where the kids are kind of like working out what attachment means to them. So I found that really interesting to kind of think about that concept from the perspective of a 12 to 14-year-old trying to make sense of that. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed this read and I recommend it for High Republic fans if you're willing to take a stab at the middle grade novels. So now I am going to start talking about the plot details. So if you haven't read it yet and you don't want spoilers, then now is your time to turn back. So the novel opens with Ranjamaram is on Valo. You may remember Ram from Phase 1. He appeared in a few Phase 1 reads, and he is a Jedi Padawan. And I have to say, he is like one of the most wholesome Jedi in the High Republic. Like, I really hope that we get to stay with this character for a while, even though I know that Phase 3, I mean, we're already in Phase 3, and I don't know how much ground it's supposed to cover, but like this Jedi, like he's just like so on track, I feel like, with being a truly great Jedi that I really want to see what he's like as an actual Jedi Knight because he just like he's been through a lot with the everything going on with the Nihil. He's been in some horrible scenarios fighting the Nihil and he's made it to the other side and he's done all of that without getting angry or hateful. Like he just always stays like so much in the light. And his perspective on the Force and just like what is important about being a Jedi, I just really love. So this is a character that I just really love to read. And I feel like I just want to read anything that Ram is in because He's just like such a joy. He did have a short story in the Tales of Light and Life collection. Now, his short story, it wasn't one of those ones where like some key info happens, so you have to read it. It wasn't that way. It was kind of just like a little side story, but it was just another example of Ram just being like so sweet and wholesome. So I enjoyed his short story in that collection too. But so when we open up with Ram in Escape from Valo, what he's doing is he's on Valo because he deliberately went back to Valo in an attempt to try to help the people living there under Nihil rule. And he's pretty much a genius when it comes to machines and technology and really any techie type of stuff. So he's figured out a way to send out broadcasts to the general public on Valo. And when he sends out these broadcasts, he disguises himself as the Scarlet Skull. So he like disguises his voice. Sometimes he even wears a costume just to like get in like the atmosphere of it. And he will basically take on the identity of like this vigilante who is trying to help the people of Valo in whatever way he can. And where the whole thing about the Scarlet Skull comes from is it's based in a child, the name is based on a child assassin group that is not active at this time in the High Republic, but they were active like a while back. And Ram is just kind of like taking inspiration from them for his look. And at the beginning of this book, he does a mission where he is sabotaging a Nihil plan. And what they're trying to do is the Nihil are putting on this thing called the Dark Fair, which is supposed to be like, you know, a messed up version of the Republic Fair that they destroyed and attacked in phase one. And Ram sabotages it successfully. But the thing that throws him off is that he sabotages it, but then there's also these three little kids that show up, also saying that they're Scarlet Skulls, who also sabotage it. And they're successful too. So the Dark Fair doesn't end up going forward, but Ram is kind of like, what was that? Like, where did these kids come from? So we find out that these three kids are named Gavi, Kildo, and Tep Tep. And they were three Jedi younglings who had to flee when the Nihil took over Valo, and them and their masters all ran into the woods to try to hide out. And originally there were a bunch of them in the woods, but unfortunately, as the Nihil took over, those Jedi started getting picked off, and it ended up being that the only three left were Gavi, Kildo, and Tep Tep. They were the only ones left in the woods. And one of them, we even find out later in the book, Gavi, he saw his master get killed by the Nameless, which that is something that has really stayed with him for a while, and it ends up haunting him throughout this book. And it's a major obstacle that he has to overcome is the way that witnessing such a horrible thing affected his life. And so once all of their masters got killed, these three kids were trying to survive in the woods together. They were not doing well. They were really pretty much barely making it. And so after that ended up happening, they did move back into the city and they were staying at the abandoned zoo for shelter. And while they were staying there, that's where they heard Ram's broadcast. And so they decided that they wanted to help him and become part of the Scarlet Skulls. And so that's how it is that they just end up showing up and contributing to Ram's sabotage, even though he doesn't know that they're coming. And so after they successfully sabotage the Dark Fair, the kids show up at the abandoned Jedi temple that Ram is staying at. And he tries to tell them to go back to the woods. He's worried about them. He's like, this is way too dangerous for y'all. What are you doing here? But that's when they tell him that there's no Jedi left. They also want Ram to train them. And this is something that he's kind of reluctant to do because he's worried about being responsible for these children. And he feels like they're in a lot of danger by even being here. And so he has mixed feelings about training them, but they do manage to convince him. Also, staying in this abandoned Jedi temple is an old Jedi master named Master Kunpar. He is pretending that he's not a Jedi. He's pretending that he's just like a temple worker, but he's staying in the same place. And so when the Nihil show up looking for the Scarlet Skulls, Kunpar is trying to get them away from the temple because that's where Ram and the kids are. And so he tells them that he has some information for them. And so he's pretty much trying to just lead them away from the temple. And they end up taking him into Nihil custody. And so, of course, that leads to a major part of this book being they have to figure out how they're going to get Master Kunpar back. But after Ram agrees to train the kids, they show him where they're staying at the abandoned zoo. And Ram doesn't really love the idea of where they're staying, but something that's kind of cool about it is one of the kids, Tep Tep, she has an ability where she is able to talk to animals and call upon them for help. And she can talk to pretty much any animal. And what she's done is the animals that are at this abandoned zoo, she has them to where they're kind of like a security system, where when the Nihils show up looking for them, the animals will just eat them all. So Ram is kind of like, okay, well, I don't love the zoo idea, but this is a pretty good security system, so he just accepts it and they end up working on some training together for a while. At one point, Gavi suddenly has a very intense force sense that something has happened with his friend Drigget. And Drigget was one of Gavi's childhood friends that they were really, really close. But once the Nihil took over, Drigget actually joined the Nihil. And so, of course, that ruined all of their friendship. And this is something that's been really hard on Gavi because he felt like he knew Drigget really well. And so he was so disappointed when she actually joined the Nihil. But even though they're not friends anymore, he still does have this force sense. Whenever she's feeling like an extreme emotion, he can still sense it. And so he gets the sense that something is wrong with Drigget, and so they all go run to find her. And what they find is that Drigget has actually captured a kid named Zyle. Zyle is one of our other main characters that we're following in this novel. And who Zyle is they are the child of a pirate queen. The thing about the pirate gang, though, is that they're kind of like good pirates, like they're kind of like Robin Hood pirates. They are stealing from people, but they're stealing stuff that they feel like other people need more. So they are out for their own skin in a way, but they're like trying to be ethical about it. And while Zyle's mom is on a mission, Zyle has this idea that they want to go to Valo because there is a sunken Republic ship, a medical ship called the Innovator that is on Valo that is left over still there from the Republic Fair back in phase one. And the reason Zyle wants to go there is because they know that there is probably a large amount of Bacta on that ship. And so they feel like if they're able to get that Bacta and sell it to the Republic, then they'll get a lot of money for it and a lot of pirate glory from it. So they do end up taking a Nihil escape pod and they crash landed on Valo. So that ship is not going to be usable anymore, but they do make it to Valo safely. Or at least safely until they get caught by Drigget. But once the kids show up and they help Zyle get away from Drigget, they pretty much strike a deal where the kids say that they will help Zyle with whatever Zyle is here for if Zyle helps them break into City Hall. And the reason that they want to break into City Hall is because they believe that there's going to be some Nihil records there that probably say something about wherever Master Kunpar is being kept. So that way they'll be able to rescue Kunpar. Zyle agrees to help them and they break into City Hall. Zyle almost immediately finds the records that say where Master Kunpar is being kept, but they originally decide that they're going to keep it to themselves in case they need it as a bargaining chip later. But that plan doesn't really last very long because they pretty much immediately realize that the stakes for Master Kunpar are very high. Like if the Nihil realize that he's a Jedi, they're going to kill him and they're going to use the Nameless to do it and it's going to be horrible. And so Zyle changes their mind and tells Gavi where Master Kunpar is being kept. And so the group all goes together and they all go down to the basement where Master Kunpar is and they face off with the Nihil and they do manage to break Master Kunpar out safely. Around this time, we also learn that Gavi has a secret Nihil ship that he has found that crash landed at some point and he's been working on it trying to fix it up. And he hasn't told anyone about it. And the reason it's a secret is because it's so small that only a couple people can fit into it. So he's kind of like, okay, I'm fixing this ship up, but like, I don't want to leave without anybody, but I also don't know how to choose. So I'm going to take with me. Only a couple people can fit in this. The whole thing just feels like a really tough decision. And Gavi doesn't even know how he would choose or if he can choose. So he pretty much just has this secret project that he's working on and he hasn't told anyone about it yet. But he's continuing to work on it because he feels like it might come in handy at some point. But of course, they all agreed to help Zyle. So the next mission that these Scarlet Skulls take on is that they're going to go down to the Innovator and they're going to try to get the Bacta. And the Jedi don't really love Zyle's idea of selling the Bacta to the Republic or trying to sell it on the black market. They're not crazy about that because they feel like they should just give it to people that need it. But they're also, on the other hand, like, well, if we don't get it, the Nihil are going to go get it. And we at least want to have the Bacta ourselves instead of letting the Nihil do something with it. Because at this time, we find out that the Nihil, they're planning to go down to the Innovator as well. But they're going down there for a different reason. The reason that they're going is because one of the Nihil scientists has figured out that in order for the Nameless to be able to be born in captivity and survive, there's a certain chemical that they need to actually like make it live. It's a situation where the Nameless cannot be born on a planet that's not their home planet under normal circumstances. So that's like some new information about the Nameless that we've learned, is that they pretty much need to be from planet X, which is their home planet. Otherwise, they're probably not going to survive. For the Nihil scientists to even figure out what they need to thrive and actually live, that took a lot of Nameless being born in captivity and then dying. So that's like a new piece of information of the Nameless not being able to be born in captivity under normal circumstances. So the plan that they come up with to actually get to the Innovator is that Ram believes that he can repair his own ship, which is also not working, if they can all get the parts from Zyle's crashed ship. So the kids have to go figure out a plan to go visit Zyle's ruined ship, get the parts, and take them back to Ram. What they come up with is they go visit Driggett's mom, who Gavi had a very close relationship as well, and they ask for if they can borrow the family's truck, and then they are going to drive the truck over to Zyle's crashed ship. And the interesting thing about this scene is that you do kind of get the sense that, like, I'm wondering if Gavi and Driggett are siblings, because there's a lot of, like, the mom is, like, very emotional to see Gavi. There's a lot of talk about how, like, alike the two of them look, and how, like, when Driggett joined the Nihil, it felt like Gavi was missing a part of himself. Like, I almost wonder if they're, like, long lost siblings. I think they're pretty close in age as well. That's actually never confirmed in this book, but I'm wondering if that's the case, just based on how Driggett's mom was acting in this scene, and based on there's multiple times in this book where Gavi's reflecting on when they were kids, they used to dress up as each other and stuff like that. So perhaps we'll find out in the future. I don't know. But so they do borrow the family truck and they go to Zyle's ship and they get the parts. And when they get there, they realize that Zyle's ship is in pretty bad shape, in worse shape than they all remembered. But they're like, okay, well, we're here. Ram might be able to do something. Let's just take the stuff with us. But on the way back from getting the parts, they have a confrontation with Driggett. And what happens is they're stopped at a Nihil checkpoint and they're being questioned about the truck and what they're doing. And Driggett shows up and actually covers for them. And so this is where we're kind of like, okay, there's something going on with Driggett here, because she's joined the Nihil, but she's helping these people who she knows are Jedi. So you can tell that something's up here, and it turns out that something is up, because we find out that Driggett, she only joined the Nihil because she felt like it was the best way to protect her family and to try to at least do something for the other citizens of Valo. Because all the Jedi fled, there was no one there to help them. It was just a bunch of regular citizens versus the Nihil. And so Driggett's thought was, well, at least if I join them, I can protect my own family and I can do whatever I can to try to help people. It's at least like she's kind of trying to dismantle the Nihil from the inside, slowly but surely, kind of thing. And she is still angry at her friends because she's upset that the Jedi just ran off once the Nihil showed up. But she also doesn't fully understand the situation of, like, the fear that the Jedi felt too. Like, I mean, she blames the Jedi for not being around to help them, but with the Nameless, the Jedi couldn't really do anything. So they were kind of all in the same boat. But so that's where Driggett's emotions are coming from, where she is a Nihil, but she also hates the Nihil too. And she also still has, some feelings left over for her friends, because even though she's frustrated with them and she's frustrated with the Jedi, her friends did mean so much to her. But once they get back with the parts, it sounds like Ram is probably going to be able to make it work. He's not 100% sure, but he seems hopeful. And once they're back, Gavi goes off by himself to work on the secret ship. And Zyle notices this, and Zyle gets the sense that Gavi is hiding something. So Zyle follows Gavi. And Zyle sees that Gavi's working on a ship, puts the pieces together that Gavi is planning on leaving and not telling anyone. And even though that's not like 100% like the whole story, I mean, there's no denying that like this doesn't look good. And so Zyle and Gavi have a confrontation, and Zyle tells Gavi, like, people are counting on you and like you're about to just ditch. And that's where Gavi tells Zyle that he knows that people are counting on him. And that's actually part of the problem. It's too much pressure. And he feels like he's not good enough or like adequate to actually protect all of these other kids. And Gavi also shares with Zyle too that he can't use the force anymore. And at this point in the book, it was kind of unclear if that meant that he was like psychologically unable to use the force because of what he saw happen to his master, or if it was actually like a consequence of being as close to the nameless as he was when his master was killed. So I was kind of wondering like which one of those it was. If it was just kind of like, maybe if you're close to the nameless, then your force abilities get affected for a while. Or if it's just that, like, he was so freaked out that he couldn't get past it. I feel like it could go either way. But shortly after this confrontation, Gavi is actually forced into making a decision. So, what happens is there is an announcement over, like, the city loudspeaker that the Scarlet Skulls have been spotted near the zoo. So, a bunch of Nihils show up at the zoo, and it's the Scarlet Skulls and the animals versus all these Nihil, and it's not going well. At one point, Kildo gets hurt. Tep Tep sees this, and she gets so upset that she actually like touches the dark side for a moment. I mean, it is not going good. Like it's an out of control situation, and the kids are like just barely keeping their head above water because they're fighting a bunch of adults. And when all hope is lost, Gavi actually runs off, and it looks like he's about to just leave everybody. But what he's actually doing is he runs and goes and gets his ship because his ship is actually ready now. And so Gavi shows up with the ship to pick up whoever can fit in it. And then thankfully at the same time, Ram's old droid from phase 1, V18, and the Bonbrax show up to help Ram. So thankfully, like, the day is saved just in the nick of time, just like it always is, right? And the reason that V18 and the Bonbrax show up is because they knew that Ram was stuck on Valo and they were worried about him. And so they had already come up with a plan for trying to get to Ram. And so they were already in the process of making their way to Ram when they actually heard Ram's broadcast. And so that's how they knew where to find him. So thankfully, everybody's going to be okay. They get rescued and they all like fly away to safety. And so when they get back, Gavi has to come clean with everybody about the ship. And Kildo, who Gavi is closest with, is hurt that Gavi kept it to himself, but also is pretty understanding about where Gavi's coming from at the same time. And so this leads to a conversation that Gavi and Kildo have where they finally confess their feelings for each other. You get the sense that they've cared about each other for a really long time and they've both had a crush on each other for a really long time, but they're only just now finally admitting it to each other. And also, after this encounter with the Nihil, Ram is really freaked out now about doing the mission to the innovator. Ram is really worried that, I mean, it's kind of like, it's almost like this encounter with the Nihil, it's all become real now. Like, he realizes the full extent of how much danger these kids are in, which he was already concerned about before, but now it's just like more real. And he's just worried about something happening to the kids because he's really grown to care for them quite a lot and he's taught them everything he knows. So he's pretty much trained them. And this brings up a cool passage where Ram is trying to work out sort of like what it means to feel attachment versus compassion and how Ram is just trying to like make sense of all of this as a young Jedi because he doesn't want to be like so attached to these kids that it's not healthy, but he also can't deny the fact that he cares about them deeply. And so Ram just kind of like reflecting on this, he is able to kind of come to an understanding with himself about the difference between attachment and compassion and like how he doesn't actually own these kids, but he cares about them and wants to help them. And he just has to learn how to still let them be like their full selves and who they want to be instead of just being so worried about them getting hurt all the time. And also just learning to have kind of like more of an attitude of they're their own people. I can't control them. That would be like the actual attachment, would be trying to make them be something that they're not just for his own comfort. And I mean, what these kids want to do is they want to go on this mission and they want to help people. And so he has to learn how to just let them do that, even though it's very nerve wracking for him. So I really loved that passage because I felt like this was a really great explanation of the difference between how you can have compassion for somebody and you can care about them a lot, but not necessarily be attached. And that is one concept that anytime that there's an explanation on that in Star Wars books, I always really appreciate it because, especially in the High Republic, I feel like the times when there has been a character that's been trying to make sense of this and they're kind of like making progress in this area. I feel like it's a really cool explanation that we get to see as the reader. So once Ram and Gavi have a conversation about all this, Gavi is able to get Ram back on board and the mission is back on. We also find out that once Gavi and Ram are done talking about all this, Zyle has actually called their mom to come help with the mission too. So since their mom is done with her own mission, she's going to come now and support them on their mission. So Ram's ship gets fixed. They all go down to the innovator together, and the Nihil also show up at around the same time. So of course there is a confrontation where they're fighting each other, and Tep Tep once again calls the animals, and she calls a big sea monster that smashes into the side of the ship and is eating the Nihil. However, Zyle, Gavi, and Kildo, they're in another room in a different part of the ship. And while the sea monster is eating everybody else in another part of the ship, Drigget is actually about to kill Gavi. So that's a close call that happens where they're facing off with the Nihil and the Nihil overpower them and Drigget is like getting ready to actually go through with killing Gavi. And I thought for sure at this moment, I really was like, no, she's not going to actually do it. But then it seems like she really is going to do it. And what she says is that the reason she's going to do it is because she feels like the Nihil won't leave Valo until all the Jedi are dead. And it sounded like she felt like it's worth it to kill Gavi because that means that the Nihil will leave her home world and leave like all of the other innocent people alone. And this moment right here in this, I mean, very bleak, desperate moment where it kind of seems like nothing else is going to come through for them. Thankfully, Gavi is finally able to manage to use the Force. I guess it was just one of those like now or never kind of moments where it's like you either need to force yourself to do it or like we're all about to die. But thankfully, Gabi uses the Force and is able to get away from Drigget. And then not long after this, the sea monster blasts into this room, is eating the Nihil. Unfortunately, Drigget and one of the Nihil scientists are able to get away safely. They end up getting in an escape pod and taking it to the surface. But the sea monster does eat a lot of the Nihil, and it also eats the Nameless too. Maybe that's a sign that there is a way to deal with the Nameless. I mean, Tap Tap can just call a crazy carnivorous animal to take care of it, I guess. Then Tep Tep sends the sea monster away, but unfortunately, they're not totally safe yet because there is a hole that the sea monster left in the side of the ship and it's flooding now. And so, what they end up having to do is the kids all hold the water back with the force, Gavi included, because he's finally kind of like had a breakthrough in this. They're holding the water back while Ram is repairing the hole. Thankfully, Ram is able to successfully repair it, and the kids are able to keep that force hold there. So it's the ship is intact again, and they actually managed to take it up to the surface. And so thankfully, they all survived this mission. And meanwhile, Zyle's mom and all of her pirates, they're chasing away a lot of the Nihil. And so they pull off the mission, and they have the Bacta now, and they also have the Innovator intact now. Now everybody's going to take the Innovator off of Valo to give the Bacta to people who need it. But Gavi has actually decided to stay on Valo. And so he's going to stay behind with Kunpar, who is also still there. And Kildo has promised that after they take the Bacta where it needs to go, he's going to come back for Gavi. The main reason that Gavi is staying is because he's taking Ram's place as the main Scarlet Skull on Valo. So he has adopted that persona of the Scarlet Skull, and he is giving those broadcasts that Ram was doing back at the start of the book. And what these broadcasts are meant to do is create a sense of hope for the people living on Valo still. And also, it sounds like Gavi's going to try to get people to coordinate to actually try to get rid of the last remaining Nihil presence on Valo too. And you get the sense that Gavi is really happy in this role, and it really seems like this is what he feels like he's supposed to be doing, and he's really embracing it, following in Ram's footsteps in a way. And then we have the epilogue, and in the epilogue we see Drigget is with the Nihil scientist that also survived the sea monster on the Innovator. And this Nihil scientist is really torn up about the fact that the Nameless got killed, and he was really attached to the Nameless and seemed like he viewed it as a pet. And what Drigget decides that she's going to do is that she's going to keep on fighting to ruin the Nihil from the inside. And one of the main ways that she's going to do it is she's going to manipulate this Nihil scientist to try to get more information from him, learn everything she can from him, and just kind of like make her way through the Nihil and try to take it down from the inside. And so I also thought this was interesting too, because I know that one thing that has been theorized and speculated on a lot lately has been that it seems like the only way the Nihil are going to actually be successfully overthrown is if somebody does it from the inside. And so this is a possible person that could do that, because her hatred for the Nihil is very intense, and she is very dedicated to trying to see the end of the Nihil and doing whatever she can to make that happen. So I wonder if we're going to see this character in future books, because if she continues feeling this way and this ends up being our person that's going to end up sabotaging the Nihil, or at least like severely weakening them, then I think that's going to be pretty cool to see that play out. So I've definitely got my eye out to see if she's going to appear in any comics or maybe adult novels or anything else, because that would be pretty interesting if we had a character that started out as a middle grade character end up being a key player in taking down the Nihil. And so that's where this story leaves off. And once again, I really had a lot of fun with this read. I loved the characters. There were just so many lovable characters in this book. I definitely feel like the middle grade novels are really a great place for finding the most lovable, wholesome characters. And so that just made this read fun for me. And I also didn't really expect us to get a couple of pieces of information about the Nameless and the Nihil that I really didn't see coming for a middle grade novel. So that was a nice surprise as well. But let me know what you thought of this one, if you've read it yet or if you're thinking about reading it. And thanks so much for watching, y'all. I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.